Daniel, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, you're a little light.
It will reconnect here shortly. I'm got bad internet at the moment.
Yeah, we can hear you though, but just barely. Oh, yeah.
Okay, call to order, please. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Spokley,
Present.
Councilmember Berlant. He is on Zoom.
Here.
There he is. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo is not in attendance at this moment. Councilmember Riddell Harris here and Mayor Amara.
Present. Thank you very much. Public comment. This is the time provided so that persons who may speak to the council on any item not on the agenda. And we will have another public comment during the general session. Okay, seeing no public comment from the public or the council. We will go into our fiscal year 2023 and 23-24 general fund and ARPA funding budget workshop. And before that, I would like to congratulate our city manager. He's first-time grandfather. So with that, you can present.
Right, thank you. I guess that's my pass, and I'll take it. Mayor and council, tonight is our first of two budget workshops, and then with the final budget coming in June. Tonight's focus is on the city's general fund and all of the service aspects that are going into that. For the council, we have a 2-year budget. The way that works is very similar to a 1-year budget. No matter what, in each one of the years, City Council will be adopting an annual budget just around June. But what it does do is it gives the opportunity to take a little bit wider view as far as the overall operations of the city, our overall spending, our overall investment in many things. I'm going to give you a really quick overview of some of the main components of it, some of the main themes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Bagwell to go through the actual budget. So the key themes, and we're going to use the word investment over and over because one of the things that we're looking to do is take a lot of one-time revenues and invest them in things that will have a sustaining value over time. If I was going to hit on some of those key themes, the word modernization, you're going to hear one-time revenues for one-time expenses quite a bit. The idea of planning for the future, and planning comes in many things, and it will go through the entire spectrum of what the city does in many respects. We will have a high focus on our overall infrastructure, as well as the idea of pursuing additional funding. We've tried to be very visionary in the budget. And what I mean by that is that we're going to give an opportunity not only for the council, but for all those on our various committees and commissions and people from the Auburn community to come together and really look at updating our planning. Where do we want to go as the future? What are the key things that we need to do for sustainability, for the environment, but also just for the fiscal health of the city? We will look at all of our infrastructure, and I'll talk about that in a sec. We want a very strong focus on our business community, and that will include engagement of all of the business community, big and small, the key businesses out at the airport, as well as many of the businesses that are within the greater Auburn area. Sustainability. Sustainability is really important. We live in the state of California. So from an environmental perspective, the state has a lot of initiatives that they want us to do. But also from a fiscal standpoint, one of the things that Nathan is going to go over with the council is the overall fiscal health of the city, and maintaining that is critical. And then finally, a focus on the Auburn Airport. The synopsis for the budget: planning, modernization. The budget that we will go over in a minute includes a lot of funding for key public safety elements. The pursuit of grant funding. One of the things that if you want to catch fish, you need somebody who's going to go fishing. And you also need to have a very concerted focus. One thing about grant funds is that none of the state granting agencies will ever give you 100%. So many of the things that we're going to pursue in this overall budget is going to involve the idea of seeding in a very healthy way, and then using that as the leverage to go to a number of key, especially regional agencies, and have them putting up some money to help us along also. I will tell you that the leveraging of money will play a big role in some of the things that we're looking to do from an infrastructure standpoint, but also out at the Auburn Airport. One of the things the budget does is it funds each of our very active committees and commissions. From the staff perspective, we are recommending what they've asked for in their budgets. One of the things that I've learned is that each of these commissions, for some of the work that many of these folks are doing, they're an absolute bargain. There's a lot of value adding. Some of the key aspects of planning is that we will hit on all the major areas, and the idea is providing updates. We're not going to get a new general plan out of what we've budgeted, but we sure can hit on some of the main components, including the zoning code, some municipal code updates, our land use plan, our circulation plan. The idea that as we put many of these things in place, we can look towards visionary elements, things like our bike and pedestrian plans, the idea of upgrades into our core business areas of the city. A lot of our documents will correlate into the exploration of annexation opportunities, maybe growing our bounds a little bit, at least within the sphere of our current general plan area. One of the key things that will be a huge focus in the overall planning side is our municipal services. In order to annex property, you got to be able to show that you are capable of serving them. And that's not only from a utility standpoint, but also from a service standpoint, everything from our public safety services to our maintenance services. From an infrastructure standpoint, we're not going to hit on this a lot tonight, but from an infrastructure standpoint, we're going to look at asset management, the idea of having a very aggressive approach to going out, inventorying all of our assets, assessing all of their condition, and we're going to hit on each one of the areas: pavement, wastewater, our storm drains, transportation, and other facilities that we have in town. We also have a number of key infrastructure projects, and Nathan will go over this, but probably the biggest whammy that we're getting hit with are a need for storm drains. One of the things that we have no funding source for, except for probably road funds, would be doing upgrades to our storm drain system. From a modernization standpoint, after this meeting, I want to take all the council and show you our current state of data storage for the city. It's super impressive. It's in the bowels of Auburn City Hall, and I would argue that if this building ever catches fire, it will burn for days. But as we look for modernization, we want to move into being what a modern organization does. We're a multi-million-dollar company. The idea that we have data-driven asset management, that we update and integrate things as far as our financial management system with our permitting, with our licensing, with our leasing, with our transparency and what we offer to all of our customers and citizens. There's a huge scanning project that will happen along with records management. And we will also be doing quite a bit of data collection as far as our police department. The budget brings in a number of some new positions and a reclassification. The budget is going to include a reclassification to a director level for a director of community and economic development. The idea of an administrative assistant who will actually do all the admin aspects for the Auburn Airport. A public works manager position, which will actually bring in a lot of things regarding city engineering and managing the whole asset management system. An analyst position, we're not calling them the airport manager, but they will be doing all things airport, including going after many of the grants that are out there. And then finally, an analyst position whose job will be to not only help in spearheading many of our key strategic initiatives, but they will be the ones going after the lion's share of the grants. My expectation is that both airport and other grants, these positions will be but peanuts compared to the money that we should be able to bring in from a grant standpoint. So with that, why don't I turn this over to Nathan, and he can talk about some of the money aspects.
Thank you very much, John. Madam Mayor, members of the council, for the record, Nathan Bagwell, I serve as your Administrative Services Director. And I have the pleasure and privilege this evening of bringing forward the proposed general fund and ARPA funding strategies for the upcoming 2-year budget cycle. As our city manager mentioned, a 2-year budget cycle is different than what we've done before. What it really does is it encompasses, you're still adopting a 1-year budget. We're still going to come back at the mid-year budget. We're going to come back a year from now and look at year 2. But what this really does, as he mentioned, is it broadens us out, and it really gets into the explanation of why and how we're going to modernize. We're going to become more transparent. We're going to become more efficient. We are going to really focus on the key strategic priorities of the city and ensure that we are fiscally sustainable and delivering key infrastructure. So a brief overview of how we're going to go through this is we're going to talk a bit about the budget development process today. We're going to go over some of the high-level strategic priorities as set by you, the City Council. We'll discuss briefly the methodology that we've used to arrive at this proposed budget. We'll then consider the general fund summary and the 5-year forecast. And we're going to refer to that forecast multiple times. We're going to come back to it because we're going to be looking at it from a couple of different angles. And I encourage any of you at any point, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll also be stopping and just kind of, generally gauging if you'd like to discuss something at certain points, but feel free, please, to interject with questions. We're going to be discussing a proposed strategic use of one-time American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding. We're also going to discuss general fund reserves and a proposed utilization of fund balance surpluses. These will be proposed to be utilized for one-time projects and deferred maintenance, something we haven't been doing in the years past, and a new practice that we're going to start implementing and proposing to council. We'll get into that a bit more in a bit. As John mentioned, there are some proposed changes to staffing levels we'll discuss, as well as general fund revenue and expenditure summary at a very high level. And then we'll conclude with discussing discretionary support. So to date, the budget development process, staff brought forward a financial update to the council at the March 14th City Council meeting. Since then, we've been working to develop this biennial budget with department heads and determining the overall requests for operating capital and outlay, and always keeping a focus on the citywide priorities and goals. That is a major theme. We've really always brought it back to the strategic priorities and how it related to that. What we do is we prepare a baseline budget, and what that's done, well, I'll get into the methodology in a moment. So we prepare a baseline budget, and we're factoring in also recovery from COVID and citywide strategic priorities and goals. So tonight where we are, the bolded point there is we're having a workshop to discuss general fund and ARPA. We'll be coming back in 2 weeks where we will address any general fund updates as needed or directed by council. We'll also at that time discuss the other funds, the non-general fund funds, and we'll bring forward a proposed capital improvement plan over the next 5 years. And in June 13th, we will have the first 2 opportunities to formally adopt this budget. If for some reason we do not adopt on that night, we have another opportunity later in June. But just note that we do need to have an adopted budget prior to the end of the fiscal year at the end of June.
Just because you're discussing the process, since we're switching over to the 2-year budget, I know that some places do like a rolling 2-year budget where they would have, next year we would go out to 2025. Is this just 2 years and then 2 years, or is there, because I know that part of this is being able to look out and be predictable, right? And so when you have to wait till June to know what's going to happen for July, that gets a little challenging. So I didn't know if it's going to be a rolling and we'll be looking out a year every time, or if this is going to be a 2 years and then the next 2 years.
I'll just tell you, it's going to be a straight 2 years.
Okay.
So as we mentioned previously, these are the strategic plan priorities as identified by you, the city council. This is what absolutely drove our proposed budget. High-performing government, valued, effective employees, fiscal sustainability, safe community, protecting health and welfare with an emphasis on fire protection, quality, key infrastructure and transportation, preserving Auburn's small town charm, sustainability through the environment, planning, transit, and economic programs, also with an emphasis on culture and entertainment, and our gem, the thriving Auburn Airport. So just a brief discussion about our methodology. The proposed budget maintains current levels of services that we have right now. What we use here in Auburn is an incremental budget approach. Basically what that means is we start with baseline from the previous year. We analyze the trends of the previous year. So what are the variances? What are they telling us? And then we consider in the department requests whether they're increasing or decreasing, and basically ask why and how all across the board. That's how we get there. So you know that consistent with previous forecasts, all positions are considered funded at 100% through the entirety of the forecast, which as we know, that's in any organization, there's variances and vacancies. However, for our purposes, we are assuming a fully funded budget. So when we look at the forecast, it's almost like a worst case scenario outside of economic factors. But if we do everything we say we're going to do, that's what it's going to look like. So I just kind of want to set that tone early. And lastly, what we do is we implement changes to the baseline budget based on this data-driven process, always with a concentration on the strategic needs, goals, and priorities of our organization and the council. So just stepping back at a very high level, combining of the 2 years, what we're considering is a $33.7 million budget for general fund expenditures. It's broken out by year. What that means is 17 million next year and 16.7 in the following year in expenditures. What's included in that is $4.3 million. Again, that covers both years. What that covers is the pension bond obligation, our normal pension costs that just come with doing payroll, and any unfunded accrued liabilities for PERS. Additionally, and we'll get into this in greater detail, there is a proposed use of general fund balance for one-time projects, and we'll get into the specifics of that in just a moment. So here we're getting our first look at the 5-year forecast. You see in the current year is 21-22. We are anticipating a $665,000 surplus at fiscal year end. As currently proposed, this budget does contemplate a proposed operational deficit of $179,000 in the coming fiscal year, and a much less, but still operational deficit in the following year of 24,000. As you see, then it curves back up into the black and goes out in the out years. So essentially the theme that I'm trying to set here is that we are representing an investment. And we're going to talk about a lot of one-time projects and the utilization of fund surpluses. So, go into this. That brings me to the use of ARPA funds. On April 1st, the United States Treasury issued a final ruling with regards to ARPA funds. Previously, we were really constricted to only a couple different kinds of uses. With this new ruling, any organization that has less than $10 million may actually make a one-time election towards their funds and use it for government services. So this now allows the city a lot more flexibility with regards to these funds, and ergo the application of them towards one-time projects. This is a breakout of the proposed at a really high level use of these ARPA funds. As proposed, the total funding, so let me back up. What the city's been receiving is 3.4 total million dollars. We got half of it already. We're gonna get the other half in a couple of months. The way the budget is put together is we're proposing $1.6 million in ARPA funding projects, one-time costs in the coming fiscal year. In the second year of our biennial budget, $760,000 projects. And in the third year, that 100,000 is really the tail end of a records management scanning project. So that's still out there. Additionally, we're recognizing that there were some one-time bonuses negotiated with the city's workforce through the memorandums of understanding. That is factored into the overall balance. So the kind of key takeaways for ARPA funds, they need to be programmed. So we need to have a plan for them by the end of fiscal year 2024. So really by the end of this upcoming 2-year budget, we have to have a plan for all $3.4 million. We have to utilize all of those funds by the end of 2026. So we've got 2 years to have a plan for all these dollars, and we've got 4 years to spend them. As proposed, the appropriations right now of ARPA are $2.8 million. So moving forward as proposed, there would still be $600,000 available for appropriation. That means a decision would need to be made the next 2 years. So of the 3.4, 2.8 program, 600 still be available for programming. What staff is proposing for the ARPA funding strategic priorities are directly in line, again, with the strategic priorities of the City Council. High-performing government. We are working dedicatedly towards modernizing and updating our workforce technology, workspace, and environment. On the next slide, I'm actually going to show you the projects that we're going to do. Fiscal sustainability, sustainability for our environment through planning, transit, and economic programs, form-based code update, records management program, transparency, municipal code update, updates to our rates and fee structures, safe community, protecting the health and welfare with a strong emphasis on fire prevention. We're proposing improvements and updates to traffic collection data for the police department, as well as capital improvements for police and fire and new equipment for our fire department. Quality infrastructure and transportation, there's a heavy focus, as John mentioned, on planning. Environmental impact review, general plan update, focus on our major business corridors, as well as preservation of Auburn's small town charm. $500,000 of capital for each, the Old Town Business Association and the Downtown Business Association. This is a breakout of the actual projects as proposed. In the column there with the dollar signs, that's fiscal year 22-23. There are some notes in the other column for the second year, but we're drilling down first on the first column there. And we talk about, we already mentioned the 500,000 for both the Downtown and Old Town Business Association. We have some workspace and workforce investments with the space assessment and some additions to admin services to modernize. We're also looking at, as we mentioned, here's the specifics on the environmental impact and general plan, contractual service fee studies, code and policy updates, records retention, equipment, traffic data collection, range equipment. So this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but as you can see, one thing that these all have in common, these are one-time costs. So we're really going to drill back on these are one-time, not ongoing costs, and how that affects our forecast. So it doesn't carry out into the out years as a perpetual cost. So it's going to bring us back now to the general fund forecast. So as part of delivering these key strategically imperative projects, staff is recommending use of general fund balance. So in doing so, staff is looking to maximize current revenue streams while utilizing the surplus. When I talk about the surplus, I'm specifically referring to the last 3 years. If we look directly at FY 2019-20 and go the next 3 years, you can see that we've been in the black. We finished those 3 years, projected to finish this year as well with a surplus. Those three combined are about $1.8 million. That is roughly the equivalent of what we are proposing to do with these one-time funds. So essentially what we're doing is we're using a drawdown strategy on the surpluses of the last 3 years. If that makes sense. What it also does, though, it maintains liquidity, cash in the bank. Liquidity is really important. There remains a lot of uncertainty in the economy. Inflation right now, 8% year over year. Consumer prices are going up. Energy, fuel have increased. Federal interest rate has gone up 75 basis points, 0.75% in the last 5 months, the most in the last 2 decades. Geopolitical concerns. This targeted use of general fund balance, while designating reserves, so we are still intending to designate reserves for economic uncertainty, pension stability, deferred maintenance. It positions the city to utilize cash for one-time projects over a projected time horizon, while retaining the ability to pull them back in and reprioritize as needed if for some reason we do head into a recession or stagflation where things aren't growing. We've covered a lot already. I just wanted to stop and throw out there, if there's any questions, I'll catch my breath.
Any questions?
I do have questions. I think I'll let you go ahead and finish up, though. It's related to well, I'll ask them now. So the one-time project things we've determined based on the April 1 ruling that's a legit expenditure that the city can
Yes.
utilize the ARPA funds for. And initially, I was looking at page 11 of your presentation where you're kind of running down the dollar amounts for each of these planned projects.
Mhm.
And I saw the EIR review general plan update at 250,000, not seeing the next column over, which is more likely, 750 to $1 million is what I would expect for our general plan update to cost us. Is that about what you're thinking, John?
Not, frankly, I think it's going to be more. What we are doing is we're seeding some of our ARPA and as Nathan described, pulling some of the fund balance. I can tell you one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go and hit up our regional planning agencies. I see us going to SACOG, I see us going to PCTPA and going, come on, everybody, it's been a while since we've gotten these types of money. I am going to go for a 1-for-1 match on all of this. And it will allow us to go deeper into the many things that we're able to do. But you look at this, 750,000 sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, but I would expect that at the end of the day, we will probably be somewhere in the $1.5 to $2 million range. And we will go seriously to our regional planning agencies and saying, Auburn hasn't been here for a while, time to help us out.
Great, thank you very much. I'll have more questions for you later.
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Appreciate it.
Rachel?
Nathan, sorry.
Councilwoman.
Yeah, maybe it's just Monday. I'm a little bit confused on what's coming from ARPA versus what's coming out of our savings account generally. So
Perfect.
all of this is ARPA money, or is it
Yes.
a combination? Okay. So when you show the next slide where we're going at a deficit, that is something else and not these projects.
Right. This is
Okay.
completely separate from the general fund.
Okay.
Thank you
So
for that question.
is it the line on the next slide? Sorry.
No problem.
That is annual. Is there a graph at some point that we could see of what our savings account has looked like over time that shows like what it would, you know what I'm saying? How much money we have in reserve on that fund balance? Like,
That's where we're going next.
is that where we're going next?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's where I was.
Reserves.
Okay. Oh,
And
Oh, I
well, I
appreciate the
didn't,
question.
I like graphs. And so I was just trying to see if there was
I have
a,
a cool graph at the end for
Okay.
revenue.
Oh, I missed okay. I didn't see that one. All right.
Oh, thank you for the question.
Okay. Thanks.
I just have a quick question. Can you, or maybe our city manager can explain how and why the rationale for going from, I think originally we discussed a streetscape extension for Old Town and downtown and then broadband. So maybe you want to get into that a little bit so I can understand how you arrived at this and why that was abandoned.
No, so the streetscape aspects are still in there. That's the money that we put in for both downtown and Old Town. There's actually a combination of three areas to think about. First, right in July, we will start up the engagement. The council's already assigned various types of subcommittees to be looking into these various things. So for especially for the Old Town and downtown, we're putting that $500,000 each in there for infrastructure. But on top of all this, we're also going to be spending probably somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 on planning aspects, the form-based code, and all those things going into it. One of the things that we are going to be looking forward to is to leverage some of the money in the form of grants. For at least for the downtown area, we've already got an entire grant application ready to go for whoever does that. So they are not abandoned. The only one projects that are still out there that are not in the budget have to do with the broadband. And I think Nathan's going to show at least one. We expect we're grabbing the ARPA money, 1.4 million.
From one time, or, well, we still are going to have 600,000 left over even after,
Well, the storm drain money.
oh, from the general fund surpluses, yeah.
So we're spending about 1.4 million from the general fund surpluses on some storm drain work that we're doing. So that if any of the things that we've talked about is getting a shorter end of the stick, it's broadband right now. But there's still, like I said, there's a lot of grants and things to go for on that. But the commitment to our business community is very robust. And as Nathan points out, there's $500,000 each for the core business areas. But on top of that, we still have almost 600,000 of undesignated ARPA money that could go towards those projects also.
So, but then if they're getting $500,000, then it seems to me that the planning would go first and they wouldn't be able to really spend the 500 until that piece is done. And will there be workshops for the Old Town and downtown? Is that what?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those will start in July.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Any
I wanted just to touch upon the broadband issue. I heard today there was some communication coming from the president with regards to additional funding for broadband and really pushing on that. It's the broadband issues. Not only are there monies in ARPA, but I think there's other monies, but they haven't been really clear on how we access them. So the League of Cities is actually pushing on that as well. So we have them pushing, and then I heard some additional information, like I said, from the president's office, that they'll be pushing down some additional information and hopefully some additional funds.
Good. That would be helpful. Is there anyone in the public that has any questions? Continue. Thank you.
All right.
You must be very clear.
Those are great questions. Thank you very much. So we are going to take a look right now at the reserve levels. So factoring in the current year surplus amount, we anticipate having $7.1 million cash in the bank. What we're doing is we're continuing with our pattern of economic contingency, setting aside $2.7 million, $1 million for pension stability, as well as $300,000 for prepaid insurance. So of the $7 million in cash, essentially we're setting aside $4 million. This still leaves $3.1 million available for use. So as we mentioned, over the previous 3 years, we've experienced what we believe to be, what we're showing to be $1.8 million of surplus. So we are proposing a use of general fund balance from those surpluses of $2 million. This would still leave an unassigned fund balance of $1.1 million. So to get into your question, Councilwoman Riddell Harris, this is specifically what we are addressing with those $2 million. 1.4 of it is a project John mentioned previously. This is a key and critical infrastructure storm drain project. 700,000 in both fiscal years for the Sunrise, Ridge Circle, Crimson Court storm drain. $157,000 for capital for the 3 fire stations. And what we're doing through this budget is we're actually taking 2 years of the fire truck lease of the truck that we're having put together right now and putting that into using one-time funds for that, after which in the model, it rolls back up into operating expenses. And then additionally, I want to key in on the concept of deferred maintenance. This is something we haven't really been doing here from a budgetary standpoint, but it's a good practice. It's a best practice. We know that we're going to need to buy self-contained breathing apparatuses for the fire department in 3 years. So what we're doing right now is we're setting that money aside and we're saying we're going to have it available. However, in the interim, we are going to pursue grant funding. We're going to look for other ways to ensure that we can maybe meet that commitment without having to use general fund money. However, either way, we're going to make sure that our fire department has the necessary equipment to go out there and protect our community safely. So I bring us back then to the
Nathan?
general fund forecast.
Nathan, just real quick, the one thing that we will get to the council, I think to Councilwoman Riddell Harris's comment, to see what the trend is on the reserves. You know what? I've seen the slide a whole bunch of times. We will get that to the council and we'll
Yeah.
bring it
Make sure.
just with at the next budget session on it, because you'll see where we're at as far as kind of the trend over probably the past 8 years really easy. You'll see that the kind of the one-time grab on the surpluses from the last 2 fiscal years doesn't deviate from where we are actually at in sustaining reserves.
And I appreciate the question because I'm also still learning my council. So I'm going to get better at anticipating these questions and we'll make sure that we address that in the future. Thank you very much. That's a great question. So we're just circling back here on the forecast again to really drill down the point that we're looking to accomplish all of these big projects, all of these initiatives, making this $2.8 million ARPA investment, this $2 million one-time fund, general fund assessment, but we're still going forward and have a balanced budget in the out years. So that's key, that we're using these one-time funds. Specific to this next component of the conversation is staffing levels. Staffing levels are perpetual ongoing costs when you bring someone on into the general fund. The city added 17 new positions in this current year, 11 for fire alone. For the upcoming fiscal year, staff is proposing 4 new FTEs along with a reclassification as they're listed here. There's a FTE administrative assistant in economic development and airport shared cost. So the general fund alone does not assume this cost by itself. Reclassification of the economic development planning manager to director of community and economic development, again, a shared cost to the general fund and other funds. Management tough one. Management analyst in the city manager's office. That is a general fund obligation. Public works manager engineer. That actually is not a general fund obligation. That is fully anticipated to be allocated out of the general fund. The management analyst for the airport, the funding for that position will not exist in the general fund, as you might guess, it's airport fund. Also, the elimination of 3 limited term firefighter positions. As you may recall, last year there was a lot of scarcity with regards to firefighter staffing, and we really needed bodies. And one of the ways that we addressed that was we created basically an emergency 3 positions for limited term. Well, that term is now essentially up. So pointing that out, that we're getting away from that. So specific to these positions, and there is a recurring theme here, the proposed reclassification of the economic development and planning manager is designed to create efficiencies within the organization. It's aligning long and short range planning and building with a strategic and targeted approach to economic and community development. And this is all geared towards marketing Auburn as a destination, both for tourism and shopping, but also businesses, both large and small, to leverage Auburn's locale, natural beauty, and endearing charm, all towards the end, of course, of fiscal sustainability and future revenue diversification and growth. The proposed addition of an administrative assistant in economic development and airport and the management analyst in the city manager's office, as you see, there's a significant focus on grants. Also a revenue generating, this is highlighted by their support and development of revenue generating activity for the city and community, while in a strategic foundational manner by which the city's revenues and imperatives will move forward as a high performing government with sustainability and quality infrastructure. These full-time equivalents represent approximately $90,000 of ongoing costs to the city's general fund. This is a big portion of why you're seeing the red in the curve, and to a much lesser degree in the second year. Positions that were also contemplated for this 2-year budget cycle include FTEs for planning and 2 new officers specific to or related to problem-oriented policing. As these positions represent significant ongoing costs to the general fund, the proposed implementation strategies as listed here is contingent upon fiscal feasibility. Adding these positions at this time would significantly shift the forecast into operational deficits over the next 5 years. So relative to what we are proposing then, essentially with a planning technician, we're proposing to hire this position contingent upon a new sustainable revenue source. Specifically, how we intend to get there, increased rate and fees for permitting and building. It's been a really long time since we've taken a look at those. We know that we're below industry and market. One of the things a management analyst coming into City Hall could do would be working on that. As that ramps up, it creates a sustainable revenue source. Then we can match that to this planning technician, which is integral to delivering some of these projects. We have a lot of things we're trying to put out there, but we're making sure that we can do it in a sustainable, strategic way before we onboard people. Secondly, the police department. Again, we're suggesting to hire contingent upon a new sustainable revenue source. However, there is possibilities for grant funding out there. As we mentioned, we're going to direct staff, new staff to hit grant funding pretty hard. Additionally, we'll be coming back. We'll come back whenever you want us to, but we'll be coming back in mid-year. We'll be coming back biennial a year from now, and we'll be updating the revenue forecast. If something changes and we see that we've got the feasibility for this remains a priority until you tell us it's not.
Just real quick for the council. We understand that the POP team is a very high priority. It's a high priority with the chief. It's a very high priority with the staff. One of the things that we do know is that there are still many of the public safety funding programs on the federal level. The reason why we are putting the positions in, but we are not funding them, is predicated on most of the grants will allow you to supplement your staff, but not supplant your staff. So if we were to budget these things and fund them and then go, oh, we got the money, so we just move the money out, that's a no-go. And typically a lot of these programs will fund the public safety positions for 3 to 5 years. At the end of those, you gotta add them into your regular ongoing. But anyway, we understand that it's a priority. We get it. We're putting them in there. I know those are going to be the first topic of conversation at the mid-year. How are we doing? When are the POP team coming in? But they will be one of our first priorities from a grant perspective to go and get those.
Thank you, John. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to step back and take a real high level look at the first year of our 2-year budget. Basically, this just groups it into its major categories. We're anticipating a total revenues of 16.8 million, total expenditures of 17.02. As projected, we anticipate that there would be an operational deficit that the fund balance wouldn't have to cover if everything goes exactly according to plan of 179,000. This is year 2 of the proposed budget. Same concept, major categories. Total revenues of 16.7 million, total expenditures 16.72. Pretty nominal, but still we just want to highlight that we recognize that there is an operational deficit anticipated. And then it gets fun. Then we combine both. So we're looking at total revenues over the next 2 years, 33.6 million, total expenditures, 33.8 million. And if you're like me, this graph will help you. I'm a visual learner. So specific to that number, and I'll go back and reference that total revenue, 33.59 million. Really important to know about that. 26 million or 79% of that comes from taxes. So of that 35 million, about half of that comes from sales tax. So that also speaks to why we're putting such an emphasis on economic development and community growth, as that is such an important part of our overall income in the general fund. So that brings us back to the general fund forecast. We've talked about a couple different things. We've talked about staffing levels. We've talked about utilization of surplus over the last 3 years. Talked about ARPA funding. So I just keep coming back to this forecast too, because we have a little bit of different context on it as we move forward. And drum roll, please, we're going to move over to Councilmember Stokely's favorite slide. This is the general fund CalPERS obligation employee costs. Just a quick overview of what this is. The blue going from left to right, that represents our normal cost. That's just the payroll cost of having public employees in PERS. The orange is unfunded accrued liability. You see orange is getting smaller, and then not on there anymore. The green is where city council made a decision last year, and it's an incredibly good decision to go for a pension obligation bond. And that's what the green captures there. So the combination of the blue, orange, and green is our total employer cost for CalPERS on an annual basis. That red line is what the city was going to have to pay had they not done the pension obligation bond. So as you can see, there's a pretty significant gap starting in this current fiscal year between the top of that green bar and that red line. And that's total savings because of the awesome interest rate and great timing and foresight that was utilized for that decision. As we move out to year 5 of this forecast, the savings is about $500,000 on just that year alone, so significant. So before I jump into a discussion about discretionary support, we're almost done. I know you guys have been great. Any questions on anything we've covered up to this point?
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just really quickly, on the elimination of the 3 LTE firefighters,
Mhm.
can you just explain that a little bit further? Did we initially hire the LTE to, before we had the permanent firefighters? Was that kind of where they were bridge or?
So what was happening over last summer is we were having severe staffing shortages, whether it was folks out for different kinds of leaves.
Oh, yes, okay.
And there was, and it just is a variety of things. And we were really struggling to staff our fire departments, and it was tough. So one of the things that we did was we went ahead and created these limited term positions and said, yes, we recognize that if these were all hired on, we would be way overstaffed if everyone came in at the same time, knowing that people were going to be out for some months. So what's then happened over time, some folks have come back. We have backfilled some of our regular full-time staffing positions, and we've identified that those 3 essentially overhires are no longer required.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the reminder about that. So
Sure.
I do now recall the situation for hiring those 3. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any more questions? Anyone from the public? This is a workshop. We'd love any input, questions.
Mayor Amara, I know Councilmember Berlant on Zoom may have questions.
Yes, I've kind of been in contact. Councilman Berlant?
He was having some computer problems, so he's rejoining as a panelist now.
All right, am I connected now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Having some computer issues here. I wanted to follow up on Councilwoman Downing Calvillo's question about the 3 FTE, because the one piece I haven't heard, I have completely understand and recall that it was a limited term to try to get us through the hiring process. But I just want to have some assurances before we remove those positions that we are staffing our engines accordingly, and we're not forcing overtime that would require those 3 positions to provide relief to our daily staffing. So I don't know if that's an answer you can provide or if that's something that the chief can do. But I at least from my perspective, I want to make sure that we are assured that our staffing is where it needs to be before we remove those temporary positions.
Certainly, and Chief Spencer was kind enough to come up and join me as well. One thing I do want to add as a caveat, when we added those 3 limited term positions, we also added a full-time FTE, essentially an overhire. Call it a floater or however you will. This was on the heels of adding 7 new full-time positions. So in the fiscal year, Chief Spencer can speak to it much better than I can, but if I recall correctly, I was pretty new at the time. We were struggling to fill those positions as quickly as we possibly could, in addition to folks being out for various reasons. And then Chief, if you want to speak to whether or not.
Yeah, thank you. Just for a point of clarification with regard to the limited term positions, they were put in play for both current and anticipated openings, meaning that we knew that we had staff that we're testing with other agencies and would likely be hired on other agencies. So what essentially happened with the limited terms is that they came in on a contract for a 12-month period. And as that opening became available, they were then moved into the full-time position. And so it has been a nice, smooth transition for us. It has allowed us to be able to have minimal disruption in our staffing process. I appreciate the support on that from your perspective. And so now currently we are testing for firefighters and testing for fire captains for 2 current open positions. We anticipate to have a list that we can draw from should we need to moving forward. And so, but currently we seem to be stable.
So Chief, before you leave, one follow-up question. I also did not see in the position addition slide that was, I think, a couple slides ago, the position that I thought we added, again, limited term, but the community risk reduction position. Can you give us a brief update of where that is in the budget?
You want to speak to that?
Thanks. Good news. We have offered a position and I believe she's accepted. And we anticipate our community risk reduction manager to be starting in the next week or 2, tomorrow, very soon.
So Nathan, remind me if you could, how long have we approved this position for? If I'm not mistaken, this was going to be a pilot or limited term as well, but can you just remind us now, based on the fact that she'll be starting Monday, it sounds like, or this week, how long will this person be on the books for?
It's permanent. Yeah, okay, I just, sorry. We anticipate this to be an ongoing position, a perpetual position. So this position is built in an ongoing, I don't believe there's an interim on this position.
I think, I remember Councilman Berlant, the discussion about that, because we initially funded the position, it was half year, we funded it. And so it sounds like we're going to permanently fund it, but I think what Councilman Berlant is really wondering is where in the budget will that show up? We just
the
want to
general fund.
ensure that we've actually established funding for that position, because when we initially talked about it last year, it was just for half a year. And I think that there was some discussion on, there was desire to move forward and make it a permanent position, but we weren't sure we had sufficient funding to make it that way. And so I think that's what he's asking is where.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for the question, Councilmember. Yes, it is in the general fund. And not to speak for Chief Spencer, as I understood it from the finance aspect, that this essentially was the person who was going to come in and help get this program established. Ergo, this is the main investment that the city's making right now into the community risk reduction program.
And it's an ongoing position.
It is.
And it's funded, and it will be funded in the fire department's budget, correct, Chief?
It is.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have for now.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the question.
Councilman Spokely?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nathan, on the reserve levels,
Yes.
I went back to the mid-year update that we did back in March and saw similar numbers. But in this presentation tonight, you talk about spending $2 million out of our reserve.
Mhm.
Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
And 1.4 of the 2 million is going to be on some storm drainage improvements. What's the other 600, 700,000, 600,000 for?
The other 600,000 are 150 for fire capital for fire station upgrades. 150, we are moving 2 years of the fire truck lease into basically saying we're going to use general fund surplus for that. Then it rolls back up into operating. And then we are setting aside 250,000 for deferred maintenance in anticipation of needing the self-contained breathing apparatuses. That's the other difference.
So that 6 or 575 is going to fire as well.
Yeah.
Okay. On staffing, you outline in your report, 2021, we added 14 full-time equivalents. I'm going to not mention the limited term firefighters that have already been discussed here tonight by my counterparts. 2022, we're proposing 4 more FTEs. And am I reading this right? The horizon slide that you presented is an additional 3 FTEs?
I'm sorry, the
Slide 18?
limited term firefighters.
No, I'm not including them.
Oh,
They came in 2021, they're
Sorry.
going out in 2022.
are you referring to the ones that are not in the budget?
I'm trying to understand how many staff
Okay,
Between 2021 and 2023, we're proposing.
There were
to add-
17 in this current fiscal year.
Okay, 2021, 17 including, so that's 14 FTEs, including the 3 limited term firefighters.
Yes,
2022, we're adding 4 more FTEs,
correct.
proposing. 2023, we're proposing to add 3 more FTEs.
Contingent upon fiscal feasibility. If we identify steady revenue sources, correct.
I'm trying to get a sense of overall staff.
Yeah.
We currently have at the city, and we're talking about adding 24, 25 additional people in a pretty short time frame.
Yes.
It's all got to be paid for.
Correct.
That slide right there mentions the possible grant funding, and John, you clarified for me. In my mind, that's always a no-no. Grant funding for permanent employees, we don't do that because the grant funding isn't guaranteed. But I appreciate your explanation.
Yeah, so the only grant funded positions that we are looking to pursue are the police. And that will give us probably typically, like I said, 3 to 5 years. And then you have to bring those on. So it buys you time to incorporate those in.
Okay.
But the other positions are very true. As we add them in, they're either going to be a combined of general fund, but most of them are actually cost allocated to include, for example, the position in the city manager's office is spread throughout the entire organization, everything from sewer to general fund to
Shared
some of
cost.
those. The positions out at the airport are going to be paid for by the airport. And so the biggies obviously are the positions that we've added into fire. The single greatest investment that this council has made was last year's edition of all of the fire positions. That is our biggest expense.
If I'm not mistaken, the majority of that funding came from the savings from our pension obligation bond and the refinancing of that. Because we were able to secure that as sustainable funding, we were able to finance that higher for those firefighters. And then I understand you're looking to create those positions in the police department. They're just going to be unfunded, so they won't be filled. You're just establishing the authority for them. And then when we have the funding, then we'll actually fill them. So, and I know that's a common practice in government to at least establish the positions, but not hire them until there is a sustainable funding mechanism for them.
That's correct.
And I guess the final question I have on staffing is, as it relates to other unfilled positions, these are all brand new positions that we're talking about here tonight, right?
That's correct.
Doesn't include any empty positions that we're trying to fill.
Oh, these are totally new.
Okay.
Yes.
So jumping back over to general fund and costs for all of this. At our mid-year budget, we projected our 2021-22 expenditure total for our general fund to be 14.6 million. Now we're all the way up to a projected 2022-2023 budget of nearly 17 million. Oh, that's the wrong one. 17 million for 2022-2023. So we've increased expenditures $3 million, $2.5 million from 2021-2022 to 2022-2023.
So that does include the use of one-time funds.
Yeah.
In the general fund.
The surplus.
That's the surplus utilization.
So we're taking 2 million out of surplus for that. Okay.
Correct.
I guess I'll just make a quick comment. I want to see the whole package because we haven't seen any of the infrastructure yet. I made a comment when we started talking about hiring all of these new FTEs that they're going to have to be paid for somehow. And here we are. We're seeing that costs are going up pretty dramatically. What's our current employee count? 75, 80, maybe?
Oh, it's in the 90s. Yeah,
In the 90s now?
Yeah. it is.
With the 17 that we've hired.
Yes. So the
Okay.
forecast does contemplate everybody at full 100% funding.
When I ran my numbers, when I was kind of grouping out what we did in 2021, because that's part of the conversation, we still have to figure out how to
Mhm.
permanently pay for all of these additional FTEs. We've got little more than a quarter of the staff was increased. The staff levels were increased by
Yeah.
almost a third. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any? Yes.
Since this is a workshop and we're kind of giving feedback, something that I think would be helpful for me is not just talking about the expenses, but about what we're going to get for those.
Okay.
So talking about, are we getting a cost reduction or a revenue increase that's going to help, like kind of the why? Because
Mhm.
just listing down the projects, I may not, or the general public may not understand exactly what we're getting for that money.
Okay.
And so if there's a reason, there's an inefficiency, we're not able to do something because we don't have the staff. So now we'll have the capability of providing some kind of service that wasn't available before.
Mhm.
The technology will provide the level of service that is, a basic core service. We're getting the basics right. Maybe we're out of compliance on something like the general plan that's been out of date for years. So I think just giving some context of we're doing 10 things. We're doing 8 of them because we should have done them 10 years ago and they're way out of date and we're behind. And so we have to get up to speed. Like things like
Yeah.
that are helpful for context. We're not just spending this money because we feel like it.
Right.
It's because we were saving money before, but really it's just more expensive to do now and it'll be more expensive to do 5 years from now. So we need to spend that money now so we can get the benefits of that and move forward versus continuing to to save money and not getting any of the benefits from those resources that we need.
Oh, I appreciate the input. Absolutely.
Thank you. And any more comments or questions? And did you complete or you
Got
have some more to do?
One more section here.
Okay.
And this is specific to the, oh, I'm going the wrong way. I am so sorry. Discretionary support. Specifically, city staff did meet with the Art Commission, the Economic Development Commission, the Sustainability Advisory Commission, as well as the Endurance Capital Committee to discuss their upcoming 2-year budgets. The proposed funding for city council discretionary support is requested to go up 42,000 from current year to next year, from 135 to 177,000. This is a 31% increase in the proposed community discretionary support by this council. I'll briefly overview the changes requested for the 4 largest commissions and committees from current year to the upcoming fiscal year. But I also want to note the shack amount, the $2,500, the tile cost has gone up. So we will probably need to incrementally increase that sum. But I want to make sure that we discuss that. So that may look different the next time you see it. Okay. The Art Commission is requesting an increase of $12,500 from their current year budget. This is specifically related to events, concerts, theater, and dance events at the School Park Reserve, mural for the School Park Reserve, installation of a grant-funded sculpture, art park decorations, and venue maintenance improvements. And additionally, they're looking to fund a City Hall gallery, council chamber, stage events here, as well as a public art fund. The Economic Development Commission, they're requesting an increase of $15,000 from their current year budget, specifically related to marketing and economic development study analysis with proposed data-driven solutions for branding for the city of Auburn. The Sustainability Advisory Committee is requesting an increase of $9,000 from their current year budget. This is specific to website maintenance design, solid waste reduction, and organic waste stream reduction, as well as support of the Auburn Master Plan. The Endurance Capital Committee is requesting an increase of $15,000 from their current year budget. And this is related to having a presence at events and swag, recognition tile in Central Square's Endurance Zone, the procurement of water bottle filling stations. I practiced saying that many times when I was coming through, and marketing and website support. What is not included in the proposed budget for discretionary is anything additional. The Art Commission did request that that council consider supporting the State Theater and Auburn Symphony as well. With the significant increase in funding proposed from current year to the upcoming fiscal year, council may wish to note this and take it under advisory, or at council's discretion, direct staff to proceed with any alternative funding as council sees fit. So that brings us to the summary, essentially what we've discussed so far tonight. 2-year budget proposal, New concept here in Auburn, we're doing a 2-year budget with a total estimated $33.4 million in expenditures. Staff has brought forward an ARPA funding strategy of $2.8 million of proposed budget programming that still allows for 600,000 flexibility for future other use. This really represents a historically significant investment in the community, providing critical infrastructure and foundational enhancements such as updates to the city's general plan, municipal code, technology, and records management. This budget is aligned with the city's strategic plan priorities as outlined by City Council. The proposed staffing enhancements are designed to generate revenues as well as increasing overall efficiency. The next workshop will be coming back in 2 weeks. We'll bring forward any general fund updates as needed. We'll bring forward all the non-general fund funds and a capital improvement plan proposal as well. Well, thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Excellent report. Yeah, Councilwoman Dowden Cavill.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for your overall presentation. I really appreciate it. I had a chance to speak with our admin director earlier on the phone, so we talked about SHAC already. And thank you very much for also giving me the breakdown of the budget for the committees. I'm sure my colleagues would probably like to have copies of those as well.
I brought extras.
That's great. I think we all would like to see that. And I just, with regards to two questions really on the EDC proposed budget. They talk about community grants and projects for $25,000. And it reminded me that we had a discussion about discretionary funding and support of community events, and that we were going to come back, I think, with a policy on that, because several of our committees and commissions may be supporting events. And I think the city manager's office also has that option, to donate to events. So just kind of as a reminder that that's something that we still need to revisit so that we ensure we don't have duplicity and we also have clarity.
So just because I've been in the conversations with, that is something that's top of mind. They've talked numerous times about the fact that that's something important to council. And that's why they're developing an application process that they're going to have it go out twice a year. So that way they know what projects there are. They can make sure they run them by the other committees. So there's not any crossover, and they'll fund them during that time in a competitive process and then open it again the next time. So it's not,
Okay, so
no shopping around or coming out of turn.
Okay, because there's some events, for example, that the Endurance Capital of the World will contribute to, and that are seriously very focused on just endurance activities, and but I was more concerned about like Arts Commission and then city manager's office, if they had that discretionary funding, just making sure that we're consistent and that.
Yeah, we think having the application process that's advertised to everyone is a fair process. And then if there's something that doesn't seem like it fits with us or it fits with the Arts Commission or something better, we can bring it to other folks and make it kind of a more seamless process where we're all kind of talking to each other.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the update. It just reminded me of that. The other point I just wanted to raise is that I see that under community enhancement that says outdoor art and murals. And I just thought that certainly is something that falls under the Arts Commission's jurisdiction. So I wasn't quite sure why it was included under the EDC's budget, but.
There's been discussion about that. It may or may not make it in the final
Okay, good.
round.
All right. All right, and I understand this is all draft. So again, thank you for supplying this to me, and I'm sure my colleagues would appreciate seeing that as well. And then, yes, so SHAC will probably also be coming to the council with a request for an augmentation because the tiles have doubled the cost. So
You're going to look into some competitive places to get them though, right?
yes, I mean, and right now, what happens is that when someone applies for a tile, they actually pay for their tile in addition to a historic tile, because there's, the folks that have died 100 years ago, 50
Right.
years ago, there's no one there to pay for theirs. So instead of saying that the city would pay, they were having other people,
Oh.
cover that cost. So like for Tyro, for example, they paid $1,500. $750 was for tile, and $750 went to file the went to pay for a historic tile.
Okay.
And so that's why they
Great.
starts to
Okay.
get too expensive. But
Thank you. Are you?
Yep, I'm done. That
Thank
was
you
it.
for your questions. Anything else? Yes. Councilman Spokane.
Just another quick comment. The increase that we saw in our projected 2022 and 23 budgets and then 2023, 24 budgets are significant, as I mentioned. Are we seeing equal increases in our enterprise funds? Because our total operating budget this fiscal year is somewhere around $30 million. When you take the 14 million in the general fund, you add in all of our enterprise funds, it's somewhere in that $31 million range. Seeing the increase just in the general fund, but expenditures to what we're projecting now, are we seeing the similar increases in the enterprise funds? Or is that
So we
Not a
are
budget
anticipating
forward.
having some increased costs.
from
as-
inflation, from gas prices, everything that we're all living with?
Yeah,
And
so we are actively, you want to jump in, John? I'm just gonna say that is the model that we are working on actively right now, is really getting into the weeds on that. Now, the first thing we did was we made sure that we could sustain any new positions that are supposed to be funded jointly by the general fund and any of the enterprise funds. Secondarily, we are now doing a thorough analysis after we get through this initial general fund budget component. So I appreciate the question. Yes, we're factoring that in, but we don't
And
quite
I'll
have that
just
all.
reiterate, because maybe I wasn't as poignant as I should have been. I'm reluctant to spend $2 million out of our reserve fund, knowing what's going on with inflation, world politics, everything that could have a dramatic effect on our community.
I see.
So that's why I asked the question. I'd like to
I
see what the
understood.
costs are in those enterprise funds, because they're half of our budget, our operating budget.
No, so in the enterprise funds, I can tell you that, as you get the whole budget package, you'll be able to do the comparison on the things. I will tell you that we are not anticipating an increase in the sewer for this year, for many reasons. Primarily because we're looking at inflation. We're actually looking at the costs of various things. Purposely, we are not going to do a fee study this year. There are a number of things that we're looking to implement as far as the sewer fund goes down the line. The council's already gotten an update regarding the airport. Realize that we're kind of stuck because the leases are already let on things. We can increase our costs out at the airport moving forward. So as we look at our overall expenditures out there, again, just to your point, where is inflation going? What are our costs going on there? One of the things that we are trying to do, specifically with the airport, the reason why we're adding the one position actually there are two positions. One will be the administrative assistant that'll be working out there. That's just to stay on top of the business as far as leases, tie downs, gathering all the revenue that comes in. The analyst position that's going to go in there is going to be looking at the overall grant funding to start bringing in the money. Because one of the things, the East End hangar project, as an example, our ability to develop and revitalize out there, the East End hangar all by itself is going to bring in over $60,000 additional a year. So as we look at those, we are going to be taking into consideration all the economic factors.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
And I think Councilman Berlant, do you have a final thought?
Yeah, I mean, in 30 seconds, I really am disappointed that we have not been able to hold the workshop on the ARPA money to hear from our community before we plug it into the budget. So I appreciate the mayor's questions about the streetscape, because it's a little hard to tell in the way the presentation showed it going to OTB and DVA, which I would hope are one and the same, but that kind of makes it sound like they're discretionary. The way that the slide looked, they're discretionary funds, but we really have not yet heard from the community to kind of support how we want to spend it. I agree with the request from Councilwoman Riddell Harris that we really need to look at the surplus dollars, get a good idea of what that looks like year by year as far as the fund balance. So I shouldn't say the surplus, but the fund balance of the general fund before we start spending it. I think Councilmember Spokley brought us some good concerns. I also just want to reiterate Councilmember Spokley's concerns about the POP team. I think it's a bad policy for us to take vital positions that we think are important and try to get grant funding. Yes, it's great. And yes, that might buy us some time. But if the city needs it, then we really should be prioritizing those positions in our budget now and not hoping that we'll get grant funding and really just kicking it down the road to this council 5 years from now, who will have to make a very difficult decision and may not be in a good economic place to keep those positions. And then the last thing is, again, Councilwoman Riddell Harris brought it up. It's great to see the expenditures, but I too would like to see the revenue year by year, because as Councilmember Spokley mentioned, these are some big investments, and I am completely supportive of the investments. These are things that are going to help our community significantly, these people, and support our existing staff, who I know many of them are overworked and don't have capacity for vital things that need to happen. But we do really need to ensure that we have the revenue that's stable to support them. So we don't have a lot longer until the budget needs to be adopted. And so from my perspective, I'm not comfortable today with where we are and really look forward to continued work. None of that, by the way, Nathan, is a reflection of the quality of work that you're doing to build this budget. We just need to see some more, I think, at the council level and the community to take a peek at some of these vital questions before we approve it. So that's all I have, but I do hope that we follow up on them sooner than later. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Berlant. And I think those are very valid concerns. I really appreciate your input. I appreciate the input of everyone here. And we have one more thought here.
Just a final thought. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for putting money in for storm drains. I know it's not something anyone drives over or looks at, and so therefore it normally gets neglected. And I mean, if our roads were in the same condition that our storm drains are in right now, we'd have a ton of people sitting in here complaining about them. But because they, are something that nobody sees, they tend to get overlooked. And so I just want to say that it's critical for us to have those. It's a vital part of our infrastructure, just like everything else. And I know that there's been a lot of deferred maintenance on those in the past. And I think it's really critical for us. I mean, it doesn't matter what your house looks like if it's filling up with water. We need to make sure that we have the infrastructure in all parts, not just roads, that are in good shape, so that way we can sustain ourselves as a city. So I wanted to say thank you for making sure that we're putting in the money that we need to for our storm drains. Aside from that, I wanted to say thank you for looking at planning and thinking ahead in this. I really appreciate the way you put this together. Things get more expensive over time, not less. So spending the money now on the things that we know we're going to need to do actually saves us money in the long run. We need to make sure we're getting the basics right in order to have trust of our citizens. So we need to make sure that we're providing the right tools and the right resources for our employees to be able to do their job in the way that people expect, which is technology and having the staff that's needed. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And also, I know that it's been overwhelming to this council in the past, the large dollar amounts that some of these things like a general plan have. I appreciate you taking bites of the elephant. I mean, if we keep getting overwhelmed and pushing it down the road, it'll never get done. So we need to be taking off bites of it, and maybe it takes a couple of years to get it all the way done, but we need to start moving that forward. So I appreciate that too. So thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate today is just a workshop, and I do look forward to reviewing the additional information. The devil is in the details. So again, thank you very much for this proposal. Obviously, we have the ARPA monies, and I agree with my colleague here with regard to storm drains, and I had spoken with our city manager about that. We've done so much deferred maintenance, and it is critical that we address these issues. And the ARPA money is specifically there. I mean, this is like one of the first items in the can spend money on, and so it's totally appropriate and very prudent at this point in stage. So I appreciate that as well. But I look forward to continuing to work through this process and discussing this further. So.
And just to sum it up, thank you. You've done an excellent job and wonderful questions. And we're in a really good position that we are worrying about how to spend money. So I'm very pleased with that. And it is a worry, though. We have to be very conscientious, and I look forward to the whole picture. I think everybody here does. And I look forward to more input as the time goes by. But I think this was very important step, and I appreciate everybody's input. So we will adjourn for until 6:30. That was about 8 minutes, and then we will start our general meeting. So thank you very much.